Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I want to talk about our new look at The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, the Book of Carol, and we officially have some new artwork here for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon. There's actually, there's new artwork, and also within the artwork, you kind of see some stuff in there that teases what the story is going to be here, and we've all been wondering how Carol's going to eventually get to France. Well, there's something here in, I guess, the poster that she's going to have that seems to tease exactly how that happens, and that seems to be a plane. There's also a new article that's been written that actually teases or sort of sets up what to expect from The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, the Book of Carol, and it looks like Carol is likely going to be, I mean, it seems like she's going to join Madame Genet. Like, it's the way it's set up here, it looks like we might have to wait for Carol and Daryl's reunion, which, I mean, I don't know, maybe we don't have to wait for it, but it seems like Carol might be on Madame Genet's side. But again, we'll talk about that and break all that down here. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. So I guess to get into the new posters here and whatnot, there's actually a couple of new posters here. I do want to focus mostly on one. I've been seeing this from at San Diego Comic-Con unofficial blog. They've been posting a lot of updates in terms of all the building wraps, and not just for like the Walking Dead shows, but all the other shows as well. Like, they've been covering all of that, and there's also just like other things related to Comic-Con as well, right? So I will say the artwork looks amazing. We have this one shot here of Daryl, and I saw this poster the other day, and I was actually very confused by it because I thought that this was the official poster for the Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 2. It is, but it's not like the official poster, like the one poster. It looks like the way that they're going to be setting a lot of this up here is that, you know, Daryl and Carol are going to be apart. I don't think there's going to be any official poster with both of them together. I imagine for season 3, maybe we will get that. Maybe later on, like after season 2 is over, they release something like that. But I feel like it makes sense to kind of wait until, I guess, season 3 to do that, right? Because it makes the season 3 poster that much more exciting. But really incredible here though. Like, I really do, like, I like the colors and all that of the poster. It's very, very similar to last year's. I mean, now we have the nest behind Daryl, right? And yeah, we just have Daryl by himself here. We also have this shot right here, which I find very, very fascinating. And obviously it's not completed yet, and once it's completed, there might be some other things in the poster that tease other storylines and whatnot. If there's anything that's there, obviously I will break that down. But just based off of what we have right here, we see Carol, and it looks like she's on like a farm or something like that. It looks like there might be a windmill behind her. There's also like a barn or something like that to her left. So, or I guess it's to her right because she's looking the other way. But yeah, so just above Carol here, just more towards the left here of the poster, you see a plane right there. And so, you know, how is the plane gonna, you know, play a role into the story at all? I mean, Carol and Daryl aren't coming back to America at the end of the season, right? Because Carol and Daryl are going to be in season 3, they're going to be in Spain, and it looks like for season 4 as well. So the fact that the plane is, you know, in this shot right here, I think confirms to me that that's how Carol's going to get there. Like, this is our first teaser here for how Carol's going to get to France, and it's going to be, you know, with the help of somebody that can actually fly a plane, right? And because I know that was something that people were wondering about, was like, well, Carol can't fly a plane, so how is all that going to make sense? Well, she's going to find somebody that can actually fly a plane, right? So I think that's how a lot of this is going to work out here. We know in the one sneak peek or teaser that we got before that Carol eventually goes to that same mechanic shop that Daryl was at before, right? And that's where Daryl was taken by Madame Genet's group and then brought to France. And so I imagine Carol is going to learn some details there, that Daryl went to France, and that's exactly how. Because, you know, in the teaser, it seems like they're not going to give any information away. Carol's questioning them, like, you know, what happened to my friend Daryl or whatever, and like, you know, like, what, did you see him at all? And I have a feeling that they're not going to say anything, and Carol knows that, but they're eventually going to say, you know, just sort of what happened, and Carol's going to get it out of them, right? Like, they're just going to say, well, this happened, and because obviously they remember Daryl, right? Like, we remember these characters from the first season, so that's how the scene's going to play out, and then Carol's going to be like, wow, so Daryl's in France, we somehow have to get to France. Like, we need to figure out a way to get there. Maybe at first she's like, well, maybe we'll take a boat and, you know, go there the same exact way. But maybe there's been a change or something different has happened, because we're supposed to learn some of the details there surrounding, you know, why Madame Genet had ships going to America, and specifically there in Maine, right? So I think that's going to lead Carol to, you know, being like, well, the only way I'm going to cross the ocean is I have to take a plane. And so I think that's where that storyline comes into play. I think that's where we're going to see Carol take the plane and then go to France. romance, and that's what we're going to see in episode 1 is a lot of that. So yeah, really incredible poster. I really can't wait for this to be like officially done here. I mean, I haven't seen anything for Dead City. A lot of the promotion here has been just for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon. There's actually another photo that I saw from at Parks and Cons that actually seems to tease that Laurent is actually on one of the photos as well. So Dead City, like, it should be there. You know, I imagine there's going to be some sort of poster. I know with The Ones Who Live last year, I mean, technically, if you look at it, The Ones Who Live and Dead City, they have the same exact release times because Dead City is supposed to be out in March, or at least that's the rumor right now. And The Ones Who Live obviously came out in February, right at the very, very end of February. So I'm looking at it like, you know, Comic-Con is basically the same distance away. And I remember last year, The Ones Who Live, it wasn't the official artwork. It was just like that red poster or whatever, but that was featured somewhere, right? I mean, Daryl Dixon still got most of the promotion and all of that, but that was still featured on one of the buildings and whatnot. So I imagine for Dead City, we could still get that. I mean, it's still like a week away or whatever, right? Until Comic-Con. So like they're putting everything up right now, but obviously we still have time. They could be focusing on this right now. And then afterwards it's Dead City. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see any sort of updates with that. Obviously I'll do videos on and whatnot, but yeah, I also wanted to get into something here that I found very, very interesting here. And I got this from Sarah Rowan on Twitter here, or I guess X. And I don't know where this originally came from. I'm trying to figure out where this came from, but everyone's been, you know, posting it at least over the last however long. And I'm just very curious if there was like an interview done more recently, or maybe this is from like a previous article that came out a couple weeks ago or whatever. I have no idea, but very, very interesting though, because it does say that season 2 picks up with Carol Pelletier back in America, who continues her search for close friend Daryl Dixon. She is forced to confront old trauma as she enlists a new ally under false pretenses to help her. Carol will eventually find herself caught up in the same regional conflicts as Daryl, putting them on opposing sides of the battle for France's future. Ultimately, the two friends will have to search for hope in the one place they have always found it, each other. So that's such a perfect like synopsis for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 2. Maybe this is just from like a synopsis for the season, but this is really revealing because we never knew how Carol would play a role in the whole like France storyline, right? Because like we knew that she was eventually going to get there. We kind of understood a lot of that, but this is all like new information. Like Carol's going to be there and she's going to be, you know, caught up in the same sort of, you know, I guess regional conflict as Daryl, but she's going to be on the opposite side of Daryl because it literally says putting them on opposing sides of the battle for France's future. So there's only really two sides unless they introduce a new villain or a new side, I guess, to all of this. So maybe there ends up being three sides or something like that in this fight, right? But I feel like this is going to be Carol joining Madame Genet. And again, Carol, she's really good at just sort of like pretending that she's not who she is, right? Like she can easily trick people and she's really good at doing that. She did that at the Commonwealth. She did that a long time ago, you know, with Alexandria. Like she's just really good at doing that. And so I could see her doing the same thing here as well, you know, and I think that would be really fun because maybe that plays a role into the whole storyline with Daryl and whatnot, right? And, you know, just what's going on at the nest. I mean, it's going to really build up to Carol and Daryl eventually finding each other, but I wonder if it's going to be one of those things where Daryl and Carol see each other, but then Carol has to leave to go and deal with this whole other thing here, like with, you know, what's going on there. Because maybe they just can't necessarily be on the same side right now. And so Carol and Daryl, you know, end up apart for a lot of the season here. And that would be really interesting because then Daryl, obviously he's going to be like worried about Carol as well. Because if Carol's with Madame Genet, he's probably thinking like, well, like, you mean she could do this or that? And which is going to be interesting because it means that Carol's probably going to learn a lot more about variant walkers and exactly what's happening there, right? So I'm really interested in seeing where that would go because, I mean, it makes sense for her to figure a lot of that out. Like, I actually pointed this out quite a bit. Like, Daryl is somebody that, when it comes to variant walkers, like, Daryl and especially Rick, they're very just like, you know, if they see a variant walker, they're not going to try and understand it or like understand where that come from, this and that. They don't really care. They'll just like kill the walker and then move on, right? Like they don't try to figure out, you know, like where did that come from? Are there more of them? Like what's going on here? It's very much just like they focus really on the present. And Carol, you know, I've noticed that throughout the years, she's been the one character that like whenever they went to a new place or whenever there was like somebody around, you know, she would play the part of like, oh, I can't do anything, this and that, you know, I'm not really that much of a fighter, only to like trick everybody there because obviously like she is a fighter. And then she learns a bunch of, you know, new information from, you know, what's going on with with everybody. And so I could see Carol doing the same thing here with Madame Genet. And maybe because of who she's actually with, that plays a role into all of this as well, right? Because maybe that person, like the engineer for the plane, maybe he actually works with Madame Genet, or there's some sort of connection there. Because the synopsis or whatever this is does say that she enlists a new ally under false pretenses to help her, right? So I'm not entirely sure what that means, if her ally has like something that he's lying about, or if it's her specifically that is like pretending or lying about something just to be able to, you know, use the plane to get to France kind of thing. So it's going to be really interesting here. But just the fact that Daryl and Carol are going to be on both, you know, sides of this whole thing that's happening in France right now, it's going to be really interesting to see where this ends up in the end here. And it's going to be a lot of fun to follow both storylines specifically. And I think it's a really smart way and sort of, I think, you know, making both storylines very, very interesting. Because the one thing too is like, I just feel like there's going to be so much like, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how you would tell a story where it was Madame Genet versus Carol, Daryl, and Isabel and everybody else, right? Like, Isabel is definitely a bigger character now in The Walking Dead. You know, like, not quite yet. She's not like an original character. She's not like Carol and Daryl, obviously, but she's up there for sure. She's a very, very popular character. A lot of people like her. And so I'm just like thinking of all those characters on screen at the same time. It's going to be really interesting to see how they manage that storyline and just manage, you know, the screen time and the dialogue and sort of all of that, right? And so it makes sense to have Carol, you know, in France to be able to sort of explore that storyline as well. This way, you know, you can spend a lot more screen time with Madame Genet and that group there because Carol's there. And so you're not really getting rid of or like sacrificing that part of the story, right? You're still going to have a balance there. So yeah, really, really exciting here though. I mean, this is what we have so far for season 2. I mean, I imagine there's going to be some interviews and stuff like that posted. Entertainment Weekly is very good for that. They'll post like, you know, usually a couple of new images and whatnot from the I guess the next season. And then there's also like an interview with like the actors or like the showrunner or what have you. And we haven't gotten anything yet. I still think there's a chance that it could happen this week by Friday. If there's nothing by Friday though, they're not going to post it on the weekend. It'll probably happen on the Monday. So I'm expecting really by then, by Tuesday, we're probably going to get something because we always have, like every year, there's always like an interview or something. Like there's actually more than one. There's usually a couple of them. So yeah, it's exciting because Comic-Con is in practically like just over a week, right? So there's a lot to look forward to here. But I did want to get into the Q&A here. I actually wanted to answer some of the questions here because there's quite a bit of questions and I figured I might as well do all this in this video right here instead of doing another video later on today. So Q&A. What is your opinion on the current state of the universe? So the current state of the Walking Dead universe. Well, I think right now people are feeling like we want some sort of direction, you know, in terms of where everything is going here. And I think the ones who live really hurt that a lot because of how they handle the CRM arc. There's a lot of people very upset about how they handled the end of that story. Now, I think a lot of people, you know, could definitely still get very excited about, you know, them introducing something new here. And I think Daryl Dixon season 2, based off of Norman Reedus' comments, you know, with the finale and some of the Varian Walker stuff, I think could definitely do that. But definitely in terms of that is something that they are going to have to, you know, somewhat fix and just make it way more exciting, right? That's why Comic-Con to me is something I'm really looking forward to because Scott Gimple is going to be talking there. Chris Hardwick is going to be there. He always asks those questions of like, well, what about like, you know, the next story for Rick and Michonne or what about this or that, right? So I imagine he's going to be asking some of those questions and we'll have some answers there. I mean, the good thing is it seems like they do want to come back. I think people are just disappointed with the overall CRM stuff because they thought that the CRM would be very much connected with, you know, I guess this fight with like the Commonwealth and whatnot, though I've always said that never made a lot of sense because the Commonwealth don't have like helicopters and they don't even have the same amount of military that the CRM has, right? So I think it makes more sense to be the CRM versus Madame Genet, which technically can still actually happen because the CRM are still a thing. They can still build to that. All of that can still be the same. It's just that Major General Beale and that whole storyline is going to be different, right? But for me, I'm okay with that. Like, I've already kind of gotten over it. I'm okay with all of that. As soon as Rick and Michonne come back for a new story and whatever that's going to eventually be, then I'm just going to be really excited for that. And I'll be okay with the CRM story ending in the way it did. Or it's not the CRM story, but just like the Major General Beale arc and the way that the CRM was, right? So in terms of the current state of the Walking Dead universe, it's definitely in a very weird area. But I think that, again, I think that's kind of intentional as well because they haven't really announced anything. They haven't really released a lot of trailers or like, the next look at something else coming up, right? Which is happening next week. And I think that's where things will change a lot and people will get really excited again, because this has happened before and this happens a lot. Like after the bonus episodes for The Walking Dead, everyone felt the same way as well. Like season 9 and 10 just got so much better after what we got in season 7 and 8, right? That all of a sudden, people were feeling very excited about The Walking Dead again. And then the bonus episodes happened and people were just like, what is going on? And then season 11 happened and the Reaper arc was so frustrating. Around the same time, you had like World Beyond and all that, and people were just so frustrated about all of that, that it built up to the finale in which we got Rick and Michonne there. We got the confirmation of like, the Ones Who Live and all that coming out. And then there was all this excitement again, and that was there for all the spinoffs and whatnot. And then just the way this arc ended, people feel disappointed again. This happens all the time, and I pointed this out before. Like this just happens a lot, and it just takes something else that's going to be really exciting with the story to make fans excited again. So that's just why we're kind of in a weird spot right now. But Q&A, what is your opinion on the current timeline of each show? Do you think it's confusing? I don't necessarily think it's confusing, though I would say that Dead City's timeline is a little bit confusing. Like, I don't know why they went into the future so much. Like, it's not necessarily that much into the future. It's like 2 years, or it's like a year or two after The Ones Who Live in Daryl Dixon, at least season 1 for both of those shows, right? Dead City is 3 years after the finale of The Walking Dead, or it's like 2 to 3 years. So for me, yeah, it seems very weird that the timeline is so off in that sense, but I think maybe it's because they wanted Herschel to be a little bit older, and I think that makes sense to me. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, I don't find it that confusing, because I think it makes sense. You don't want to have them all completely lined up. That's not going to happen that way. But it's also like the timelines don't necessarily matter as well, though, because if you're ever going to have Daryl and Carol, but like Daryl and Maggie together again, right? And like maybe it's an Endgame spinoff and then Rick shows up and all of that. Like, it doesn't really matter where the shows end. If it's like a year before this and that, it's all going to be in the same time at that point. So it's one of those things that I really don't pay attention to, honestly. In terms of the timeline, I really do not pay attention at all to what's going on and whatnot with The Walking Dead. So Q&A, how did you discover the Walking Dead franchise? Well, I've talked about this before, and I'm actually thinking about doing like a video, a vlog or whatever to upload on the channel of just like explaining how I got into The Walking Dead and a lot of that. But what happened was, it was around the time that season 2 was airing on cable. It was like the second half of season 2 though. So I would say, was that early 2013, or it was like late or early 2012 maybe? Maybe it was early 2012 actually. That sounds a little bit more right, because the show came out in fall of 2010, right? So season 1 would have aired, I guess, all of that year, with season 2 airing at some point in 2011 going into 2012. Like, however it worked out, it was something like that. And my brother and my family were actually watching it. So my brother was watching it, as well as like my mom. Actually, both of my brothers were. They were just watching The Walking Dead upstairs, and I was downstairs. I don't remember what I was doing, but I know at one point I went upstairs just to like, I don't know, get supper or like something like that. And they were saying, oh, you should watch this show. It's called The Walking Dead. Like, it's a really good show. And it was like the first episode was on, and they said like, oh, look, that guy got stuck under the tank or whatever. And, in the next episode, he eventually got out and he met these people or whatever. Like, it's a really good story. And I was just like, oh, it's kind of interesting. And they literally watched that whole first season on Netflix then. And I remember thinking like, I don't really care. Like, I'm not going to watch it. And what's funny about that is that I actually saw The Walking Dead before that. Like, before the show ever aired on cable, there was trailers and whatnot for, the show's premiere on Halloween. And I remember, because we were at like the old apartment or whatever, and I remember seeing like on the small TV that I had, like the trailer and whatnot on AMC. They'd be promoting it for like the next season. I remember thinking like, oh, that looks really cool. You'd see a lot of shots of like Rick in the hospital and all that. And I remember thinking like, oh, I gotta check that out. I never did. I guess I just kind of forgot about it. But by the time that, my family was actually watching The Walking Dead, I gave it a chance like the next day, I think. It was the next day or the day after, because they were still watching it, and I saw a scene that looked really cool. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember seeing something, because I kind of stood up there for a little bit, and I was like, oh, this looks kind of cool. And so I watched the first episode, and I was just like, wow. It just like changed my life, and I've watched The Walking Dead like every single Sunday since then. I have not missed a Sunday. I don't think I've ever missed a Sunday. I'm trying to think of if I ever have. I really don't think I have. Like, maybe for like Fear the Walking Dead, because there was a couple Sundays or a couple years, I would say, where I didn't really care to watch. I mean, I still followed along with what was going on, but in terms of The Walking Dead and the main characters and all that, I've never missed a Sunday since then. So that's how I got into The Walking Dead in general. And then I discovered much later on that there were comics, and then I eventually started to read that around like season 6 or something, season 6, 7. I started to read the comics quite a bit, and then because people would talk to me before that, around like season 4 and stuff, and saying like, oh, they're probably building to this. They're probably going to get to like Alexandria or the hilltop. And I was like, what is that? And they would say, well, actually, my buddy would say, no, well, it happens in the comic. And I was just like, what? Like, to me, it didn't really seem like they connected the two, but obviously they did, right? So that's sort of how I discovered The Walking Dead. That was like very, very early on and how I discovered all of that. But yeah, Q&A. Do you truly believe there will be a second season of The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live? If so, how would you like to see the story play out? I do believe there is going to be a second season of The Ones Who Live. Well, actually, do I believe there's going to be a second season? I'm not sure because I think there will be a new story. So I truly do believe there will be a new Rick and Michonne story. But if it's a second season of The Ones Who Live, that's kind of hard to say because for The Ones Who Live to get a second season, I guess it's possible, but I also just think that they might end up doing a new series because I think the whole saying of "we are the ones who live," I feel like it's not going to really necessarily be a saying that will be said a lot in like a season 2 because it made sense for where they were at. They were trying to find each other and all of that. So it was something that was really like, they were trying to survive, right? In season 2, it might not necessarily be like that, where they're trying to survive so much, where it's like, we are the ones who live, we will push through this kind of thing, right? Like, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be that right away. There might be something else that happens, but yeah, I don't know. Q&A. Do you think that the spies that Bill talked about with Rick, is it possible Lance was one of those spies? I think that Lance must have been one of those spies, and I still kind of believe that he was, because there's no other characters out there that I'm thinking of that I'm like, well, could they have been a spy? Could that character have been a spy? I think with Daryl Dixon season 2, there's a chance that some of those characters can be spies as well. But I think for sure Lance, because he was at the Commonwealth, because of those connections and stuff that he's talked about, that makes sense to me. I think that they can easily make that connection right there. I don't know when they're going to make that connection. It seems like they were really hinting at it, but there's like no confirmation there. But yes, I do think Lance was actually one of Major General Bill's spies. Q&A, how far are you into Attack on Titan? And what are your thoughts on it so far? So Beanie, our mod asked the question. I have not actually watched it yet. Actually, that's not true. I watched like 2 minutes of it yesterday on my phone, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I'll watch this because it's like 40 minutes or it's like an hour, but then I saw it's like, oh, 20-minute episode. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna sit here and watch this first episode, and then the app crashed, and I could have just like, rebooted the app or whatever, restarted it, but I just thought, I'll watch it later. So that's where I'm at right now. Q&A, if they make a Telltale's Walking Dead TV show adaptation, do you think we could see the CRM dropping the bombs in the city as we see Lee in the police car heading out of Atlanta? That's the crazy thing about that, though, is like the fact that they connected that the CRM was really responsible for doing a lot of that. That's going to change a lot of how we look at a lot of things here. And actually, I'm kind of confused by that. So was it the CRM that did it, or was it the CRM that knew about it? They knew that they were about to do that. And so Okafor decided he didn't want to, and he stayed in Philadelphia with the CRM. I don't remember if the CRM were actually involved with that, or if they're one of the communities that survived one of those attacks. Q&A, what are some of the biggest questions you would like answered at Comic-Con this year? I think one of the biggest questions I would like answered this year would have to be stuff about Rick and Michonne. For sure, there is that. The idea of a new spinoff, I think, would be really cool. And I mean, that's basically it, because I kind of know what else we're going to be getting. I mean, I guess other characters like Morgan, Dwight, like, are we ever going to see them again? I guess just some more news on like the crossovers and all that happening. Q&A, what's the one album or band you wish you would have to play at any time during all of the apocalypse? So that's a good question. I think I would have to go with like Van Halen, I feel like, because there's a lot of songs by them that I listen to just sort of throughout the year. Like during the spring, there'll be certain songs that I play, and then also in the fall as well, I'll play certain songs there. So, I mean, I guess it's kind of hard to say. Like Van Halen would be one of the bands for sure. If there was an album, though, I might have to go with like Appetite for Destruction. I feel like that album for me is one of my favorite albums of like all time. I mean, there's Appetite for Destruction, and then there's also Thriller. I love both those albums a lot, so I'd have to go with probably one of those two albums. Q&A, will you make more Marvel videos if they announce stuff for Phase 6 next week? Love all you do. Thank you so much. I was actually thinking about doing some, I don't know if I'll do necessarily Marvel videos in terms of some of the announcements. It depends. Like if I'm excited about it, then I will. If it's stuff that I don't really care about, I don't know if I will, because it's not like I cover that on the channel a lot anyways. But I will for sure be doing a Deadpool and Wolverine review. I'm actually so excited to see that, because I see that in like a week from now, or it's like 8 days from now or something. So I'll do my review for that and all that. And then any kind of announcements that we get, like who knows, maybe I watch that movie and I'm so excited about Marvel again that I start to to actually do some Marvel videos. That's a big reason why I don't do Marvel. Like, I know Marvel, people watch Marvel. It's like one of the biggest things to cover out there, but I just can't do it if I don't have interest in it. You know, like, I need to have interest in it to be able to actually like cover it, and I don't really care about it right now. I haven't, you know, really since Avengers Endgame. So we'll see if Deadpool and Wolverine changes that. We'll see what they announce here. But yeah, I'm excited for that. So definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.